What kind of crazy things do you think ancient cultures did? If you're thinking human sacrifice, cannibalism, or maybe some wild orgies, then you are absolutely right. From a culture that ate their own babies, to one that dipped their toes into a volcano. These are 10 bizarre rituals from ancient cultures that will astound you. Let's get started. Number 10. The perfect wife. In modern times, we have all heard of plastic surgery and how people go under the knife to enhance their looks. But did you know that as far back as 2700 BC, the ancient Mesopotamians were doing something very similar? Back in those days, the women weren't too concerned with their nose or their eyes, but they were obsessed with their teeth. The standard for beauty in Mesopotamia was to have large, perfectly shaped front teeth. And if you didn't have them, well, you would just have them filed down to make them look bigger. Today, we know that filing down your teeth is not only painful, but it can also be extremely dangerous. There are so many nerves in your teeth that when you mess with them, they can die. Even worse, the bacteria can get into your tooth and cause an infection that spreads to your jawbone and even your brain. It was risky, but the Mesopotamian women still did it. They used tools made of bronze to file down their teeth until they were perfectly smooth and perfectly round. Then they would fill the gaps with gold. Not only did this give them the perfect smile, but it also made them look like they had a lot of money. For these women, having the perfect teeth meant that they were ready for the perfect husband. The men of ancient Mesopotamia preferred women who had nice teeth, because it meant that she was healthy and could bear children. So if you wanted to find a husband, getting veneers was the way to do it. Number 9. Inviting death. The Aztecs were an ancient civilization that lived in Mexico. Over 1,000 years ago, they were known for their incredible artwork and architecture, but they were also known for their crazy rituals. One of their most famous rituals was inviting death. This might sound like something that Satan would do in a horror movie, but it was actually something that the Aztec warriors did before going into battle. Before going into battle, they would cover themselves in tattoos that symbolized death. They also wore special outfits that looked like skeletons. And to top it all off, they also wore masks that looked like the god of death. After they dressed up like they were already dead, they would go to war. They believed that if they looked like death itself, then death wouldn't claim them. It was a really weird ritual, but it worked for them. To this day, nobody knows why looking like death kept the Aztec warriors alive. No. 8. A feast of flesh. When you think of ancient Greece, you probably imagine white marble statues and handsome men. But what you may not know is that the Greeks also had their own version of the cannibals. Now, it's important to clarify that the ancient Greeks weren't exactly sitting around eating little Timmy's arm after he kicked the bucket. Instead, they reserved cannibalism for special occasions. During the mysteries of Eleusis, they would eat cakes made of ground-up human bones. These cakes were supposed to give whoever ate them superpowers. During the mysteries of Isis, worshippers of the Egyptian goddess Isis would also partake in human cannibalism. They believed that by eating the flesh of Osiris, the god of the underworld, they would become immortal. So during festivals, they would eat cakes and drinks made out of barley and sesame seeds. They believed that these foods contained the flesh of Osiris himself. We don't know if the Egyptians and Greeks really gained superpowers from their cannibalism, but we do know that it was pretty disgusting. Number 7. Wasting away. Imagine being the ruler of a mighty empire, having everything you could ever want, and yet wasting away to death because you have to follow a stupid ritual. Well, unfortunately for him, that's exactly what happened to the great Roman Emperor Nero. Nero was only 30 years old when he took his own life. He was born into royalty and had all the money and power that came with it. But his tragic end came because of a stupid fertility ritual. See, when Nero's mother, Agrippina, gave birth to him, she wasn't exactly young. She was almost 40 years old, and her baby wasn't acting like most babies. He wasn't gaining weight, and he wasn't growing taller. So his mom did what any desperate mother would do. She took her infant son and wasted away to death. She literally wasted away to death. Of course, she didn't want to kill Nero, but she believed that if she died while holding him, his soul would transfer into her body and save him from dying. Unfortunately for her, it didn't work. Nero lived, but he had severe health problems, and it's likely that he suffered for the rest of his life. Number 6. Blood brothers. Today, we have blood donation centers where people can go to donate blood. But did you know that as recent as the Middle Ages, blood transfusions were considered a treatment for mental illness? Doctors in the 17th century believed that by removing someone's blood and replacing it with someone else's blood, they could cure them of their ailments. They didn't understand blood types, so they just took blood from whoever they could get. They would take two sick people, remove some of their blood, and then mix the two together. They thought that by combining the blood of two people, they would balance each other out and make them both healthier. Now, this obviously sounds ridiculous today, but it actually worked sometimes. By removing some of a sick person's blood and replacing it with someone else's, they were curing them of whatever they had. What they didn't realize was that they were basically giving them a blood transfusion, which hadn't been invented yet. But hey, Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. No. 5. Diving into the volcano. If someone told you to take a vacation to Hawaii, you would probably say yes. Hawaii is beautiful, but did you know that 100 years ago, the Hawaiians were trying to escape the island? Over 1,000 years ago, the Polynesians were masters of navigation. They sailed across the ocean in canoes to discover new islands and new lands. But sometimes their journeys would be long and treacherous, and they needed a miracle to help them get to shore. And that's when Pele would come in handy. Pele was the Hawaiian fire goddess, and she lived at the top of a volcano. When Polynesian sailors were exhausted and about to give up, they would ask Pele for help. They would build a raft and load it with food and supplies, then send it down the volcano. If Pele accepted their offering, she would calm the seas and help them reach land. But if she didn't accept their offering, then they were on their own. It's unknown how many people sacrificed themselves by diving into a volcano, but we do know that it happened at least once. In 1300 AD, a chief named Lama Halama survived a plunge into a volcano. He built a raft and offered it to Pele, and she helped him survive the fall. No. 4. Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary is probably the most famous ghost story of all time. The legend goes that if you turn off all of the lights in your bathroom and stare directly into the mirror, you'll see the ghastly specter of Bloody Mary standing behind you with a knife. Then she'll come out of the mirror and slit your throat from ear to ear. It's a scary story, but it's also a very real one. In the early 1900s, there were hundreds of cases of girls disappearing from bathrooms. They would go into the bathroom to wash their hands, and they would never come out again. Sometimes their bodies would be found, but most of the time they were never seen again. People started to believe that a ghastly specter was taking them away, and the only way to avoid it was to never enter a bathroom alone. It's still unknown what happened to all of these girls, but we do know that the Bloody Mary legend is based on a real-life killer. Her name was Mary Eleanor Bowles, and she was a serial killer who targeted women in bathrooms. She would invite them to her apartment under false pretenses, then beat them to death and throw their bodies out the window. Her reign of terror ended when she was finally caught and sentenced to life in prison. No. 3. Human shields. Cannibalism is a taboo subject in modern society, but did you know that as recent as World War II, it was practiced by the Japanese army? During the war, the Japanese were known for their brutality and their willingness to do anything to win. When they invaded China, they committed terrible atrocities, including cannibalism. The Japanese soldiers would torture their prisoners, then eat their flesh. They would roast human meat over an open fire and serve it to anyone who would eat it. To them, it was just another way of surviving in a brutal world. It wasn't until after the war that people realized the true extent of their cannibalism. Documents were uncovered that showed the Japanese army cannibalizing their own soldiers. They would chop up soldiers who died in battle and feed their flesh to the living. This was done to conserve food and make sure that no one went hungry. The Japanese army was willing to do anything to win the war, and cannibalism was just another one of their many atrocities. No. 2. Eating their young. Spartans were fierce warriors, but did you know that they were also crazy? When a Spartan boy was born, he would be examined closely to make sure that he was strong enough to survive. If he was born with any disabilities or deformities, he would immediately be taken away and left to die. This might sound heartless, but it was necessary to ensure the survival of the fittest. Only the strong survived in Sparta, and that meant that the weak were abandoned. But the Spartans didn't stop there. They would also force Spartan boys to live in the wilderness. They would leave them to fend for themselves and learn how to survive in the wild. This was to toughen them up and make them more resilient. The Spartans believed that if they couldn't survive in the wild, then they wouldn't be able to survive in war. The Spartans were willing to do whatever it took to make their boys into the strongest warriors possible. So if you were a Spartan boy, life was definitely not easy. Number 1. Drink your medicine. Today, we have a wide variety of medications to treat all sorts of ailments. But did you know that in the past, people would drink urine as medicine? Urine was used to treat everything from kidney stones to burns. It was also used as a disinfectant and even a toothpaste. In ancient Rome, urine was delivered to homes in special containers, and families would use it for all sorts of purposes. In medieval Europe, urine was used to clean clothes and linens, and it was also used as a gargle or rinse for the mouth. People believed that urine could cure everything from bad breath to sore throats. In fact, urine was used as a medicine for centuries, and it wasn't until the 19th century that people started to realize that it wasn't very effective. Today, we know that urine is not a good source of hydration, and it should never be used as medicine. But in the past, it was a common practice that people swore by. Click here to watch one of these next videos, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing content.